right, good morning, everyone. Today I'm reading the first chapter of the last 7 chapters of Daniel. In other words, Daniel chapter 7. And once again, I say it that way because you all know the first 6 chapters of this book are historical, and this is now the beginning of the next 6 chapters, which are prophetical. So chapter 7 begins with prophecy, or it's actually Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts, or the statue. I got a picture of the statue up on the screen. That statue is the same, he's having the same vision that Nebuchadnezzar had in chapter 2 of Daniel. Only the difference is Nebuchadnezzar's vision, or dream, was from Nebuchadnezzar's viewpoint, human viewpoint. That was his statue, the statue. Daniel's vision is from divine viewpoint, and that's the difference in the 2 chapters and their interpretation as we go through them. So, we see in the very first verse, it says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon," and Belshazzar, this is the familiar screen we have of these kings. Right in the middle, we have Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon, the greatest greatest pagan king in the Bible. After Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonidus and Belshazzar sort of ruled together during this time after Nebuchadnezzar. And Belshazzar is the last king of the Babylonian Empire. We read about him in chapter 5. That's the chapter with the handwriting on the wall. That was the very last night of the Babylonian Empire as they were having their drunken orgy and party. Cyrus the Great was outside the wall, ready to come into Babylon and destroy it and kill them all and become the the empire of the Persians. Started right there. They had quite a huge area that they took over. So that's where we are with this thing. Chapter 7 is in the first year of Belshazzar, not the last year. So it's right at the beginning. So chapter 7 comes before chapter 5. Okay, we get all that. So remember, the Babylonian Empire looked sort of like this in the green. I have it up on the screen. And you can see where they had control, or their empire was. Right above the green part, you see the tan or brown part. That's the Medians and the Persians. And I have another picture of this where this whole area now is the Persian Empire. And you can see that on the screen. This thing extends from basically India all the way over to Europe. And Turkey and so forth. You see Lydia and Thrace, that's Turkey, and what's the name of the next one? Greece, maybe? Thrace? Anyway, you can see the Black Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. That's the Persian Empire. This is the Persian Empire again with a different picture on it. And we know that based on our statue, which I'm going to cover in a few minutes, or these visions he had, Alexander the Great came, took over the whole thing, plus more. So that's going to happen later. But as for now, in our book, in Daniel, this is where we are. Back to the statue. Okay, so Pastor Jesse taught chapter 7 of this book, and I'm going to quickly summarize what he had about that, but I have some other things I wanted to emphasize, and that's these pictures we have. The vision that Daniel has is not necessarily this statue, but it's these animals that come up. And the first one we see in verse 4? The first was like a lion and had wings of an eagle. So the lion represents Babylon. You can see that in the picture. And he is the king of beasts, the lion. And Babylon was the king of beasts. They controlled pretty much everything over there. And the wings indicate the swift conquest of a strong and cruel kingdom. Babylon was a cruel kingdom, and they swiftly conquered what they did. The next verse, verse 5, talks about the bear. Behold, another beast, a second one resembling a bear. So the bear is Medo-Persia, which we again can see from the picture. Bear is a ferocious animal. It's very violent in its behavior. And in their conquest, they conquered Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. I had a picture of Lydia. You can see it up in the far corner of this map. That's where Lydia is. That's Turkey, basically. And it goes down to Egypt. That's how far down it went also. Okay, verse 6 is the leopard. After I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads. So the leopard is Greece. Greece is Alexander the Great. Leopards, of course, are very swift and they're very cunning. And that's what Alexander was. He quickly conquered a lot of land. In 10 years, he had it all. It didn't take him that long. He was still a young man when he did it. The 4 wings speak of his ability to strike quickly, which is exactly what he did. As I mentioned, he conquered it all very quickly. He captured the entire region. But when he died, his kingdom was split up between his 4 commanders. The verse reads, the 4 heads. There they are. And these 4 generals or 4 commanders split this whole area up amongst the 4 of them before it finally started to deteriorate. We get down to verses 7 and 8 for the 4th beast. I kept looking in the night visions. Behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, extremely strong. It had large teeth. It devoured and crushed, trampled down the remainder with its feet, etc., etc. This 4th beast is a Rome. And there's a little more description of it over in verse 19. When I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others. You notice these pictures. I don't know if you can see it really well, but the first 3 are animals. The 4th one, it's not even an animal. It looks like a dinosaur, but it's got the 10 horns on its head. And as it's described here in our chapter, it's different from all the others. It's exceedingly dreadful. Its teeth are of iron, its claws of bronze. It devours, crushes, tramples down the remainder with its feet. Well, Rome was a fierce and ferocious empire with its emperors. They were all very cruel. Rome is the place where crucifixion was invented. Jesus and Peter were hung on the cross. Paul was thrown in the prison and then later beheaded. John was banished to the island of Patmos. Christians were fed to the lions. Christians were also burned. This was a cruel, cruel place, Rome was. And when they conquered you, you were in great fear for having that done. So this description of this beast goes on about the 10 horns. These are the 10 kingdoms that are going to and then from them 1 horn will conquer the others. We see this in verse 8. There's a last horn, the little horn it's called. That one will conquer all the rest of them. And that 1 horn is going to dominate the empire and eventually become the world leader. And we're now talking about the Great Tribulation. We're talking about the Antichrist doing that. I'll get back on that in a minute. But verses 9 and 10 are the Ancient of Days. Pastor Jesse taught us about the Ancient of Days. This is God the Father. Verses 13 through 22, quickly summarize that, is the visions explained. Daniel's vision is explained or interpreted. These 4 beastly kingdoms are replaced by this one, and then this one that now is going to replace that is the Lord Jesus Christ kingdom in the millennium. Now, back to the Antichrist. In the Great Tribulation, this man is going to be a very charismatic leader. A lot of people will follow him because he's charismatic. He's going to be very clever. He's going to be cultic, and he's going to be cruel. And for the last 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation, he will be persecuting Christians and totally wearing them out. As I read in verse 25, he will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One. So he's going to be after Christians during the last 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. And of course, Christians are in heaven, but the Jews are going to cry out for help, and that's when the Lord will return at the second advent. Okay, I wanted to make a note about this Antichrist, or this description we're seeing here in Daniel. This applies to several different people during the course of history that were tyrants in history. And the main one that pops up for us here is Antiochus Epiphanes, who reigned from 175 to 164 BC. So in other words, 175 years before Christ, Antiochus Epiphanes was the ruler. He came from, a better map here, he came from the the Persian side. You can see where Persia is on this map. Even further east from there, that's the Seleucid Empire that one of the 4 generals had. He came out of that empire there. He oppresses God's people. He rules that entire empire as one of the 4, as I mentioned. He did a lot of things to the Jews. He banned circumcision. He ended sacrifice on the temple. He defiled the temple by sacrificing a pig. He placed a sacred object of Zeus, one of the gods he worshipped, in the Holy of Holies. Remember, that was where no one else could go, but the one priest could go in there. He burned copies of the scriptures, and he slaughtered those who were true to their faith in God. We know from history, the Maccabees eventually overthrew him and got rid of him. But that's who this guy was. And that's another description we're seeing here out of Daniel's vision. Okay, and then quickly, as I mentioned, we know Pastor Jesse taught this chapter. A couple of things he covered I just wanted to summarize just for remembrance. He taught us this chapter has 3 visions. One of the visions is the vision of that statue. Another one is the 4th beast. There's a big description about the 4th beast. The little horn is another one. The Roman Empire is mentioned in here, the Antichrist, the Ancient of Days, and then how all of this connects, this chapter, all of this connects to Revelation. And we saw some passages out of Revelation. Okay, and let's begin reading now in Daniel chapter 7, and I'll begin at verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and the 4 great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had wings of an eagle. Let me get the page turned here. The 4th was like a lion and had wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand. On 2 feet, like a man, a human mind was also given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, and extremely strong, and it had large teeth, and it devoured and crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. I kept looking until the thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, and his throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. Then I kept looking, because the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with a cloud of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is as an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all of this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the Highest One will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up before, which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the Highest One. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Thus he said, the 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One, and he will intend to make altercations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the Highest One. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. At this point, the revelation ended. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts were greatly alarming me, and my face grew pale, but I kept the matter to myself.